But there is one aspect in which it resembles all these doctrines. Its only possible object being abstractions, it is forced by its very nature to ignore real men, outside of whom the truest abstractions have no existence. To remedy this radical defect, positive science will have to proceed by a different method from that followed by the doctrines of the past. The latter have taken advantage of the ignorance of the masses to sacrifice them with delight to their abstractions, which, by the way, are always very lucrative to those who represent them in flesh and bone. Positive science, recognizing its absolute inability to conceive real individuals and interests itself in their lot, must definitely and absolutely renounce all claim to the government of societies. For if it should meddle therein, it would only sacrifice continually the living men whom it ignores to the abstractions which constitute the sole object of its legitimate preoccupations. The true science of history, for instance, does not yet exist. Scarcely do we begin today to catch a glimpse of its extremely complicated conditions. But suppose it were definitely developed, what could it give us? It would exhibit a faithful and rational picture of the natural development of the general conditions, material and ideal, economical, political and social, religious, philosophical, aesthetic and scientific, of the societies which have a history. But this universal picture of human civilizations, however detailed it might be, would never show anything beyond general and consequently abstract estimates. The milliards of individuals who have furnished the living and suffering materials of this history, at once triumphant and dismal, triumphant by its general results, dismal by the immense hecatomb of human victims crushed under its ear, those milliards of obscure individuals without whom none of the great abstract results of history would have been obtained, and who, bear in mind, have never benefited by any of these results, will find no place, not even the slightest, in our annals. They have lived and been sacrificed, crushed for the good of abstract humanity, that is all. Shall we blame the science of history? That would be unjust and ridiculous. Individuals cannot be grasped by thought, by reflection, or even by human speech, which is capable of expressing abstractions only. They cannot be grasped in the present day any more than in the past. Therefore, social science itself, the science of the future, will necessarily continue to ignore them. All that we have a right to demand of it is that it shall point us with faithful and sure hand to the general causes of individual suffering. Among these causes it will not forget the immolation and subordination, still too frequent, alas, of living individuals to abstract generalities, at the same time showing us the general conditions necessary to the real emancipation of the individuals living in society. That is its mission. Those are its limits, beyond which the action of social science can only be impotent and fatal. Beyond those limits being the doctrinaire and governmental pretensions of its licensed representatives, its priests. It is time to have done with all popes and priests. We want them no longer, even if they call themselves social democrats. Once more, the sole mission of science is to light the road. Only life, delivered from all its governmental and doctrinaire barriers and given full liberty of action, can create. How to solve this antinomy? On the one hand, science is indispensable to the rational organisation of society. On the other, being incapable of interesting itself in that which is real and living, it must not interfere with the real or practical organisation of society. This contradiction can be solved only in one way: by the liquidation of science as a moral being existing outside the life of all, and represented by a body of breveted savants. It must spread among the masses. Science, being called upon to henceforth represent society's collective consciousness, must really become the property of everybody. Thereby, without losing anything of its universal character, of which it can never divest itself without ceasing to be science, and while continuing to concern itself exclusively with general causes, the conditions and fixed relations of individuals and things, it will become one in fact with the immediate and real life of all individuals. That will be a movement analogous to that which said to the Protestants at the beginning of the Reformation that there was no further need for priests for man, who would henceforth be his own priest, every man thanks to the invisible intervention of the Lord Jesus Christ alone, having at last succeeded in swallowing his good God. But here the question is not of Jesus Christ, nor good God, nor of political liberty, nor of judicial right, things all theologically or metaphysically revealed, and all alike indigestible. The world of scientific abstractions is not revealed, it is inherent in the real world, of which it is only the general or abstract expression and representation. As long as it forms a separate region, specially represented by the savants as a body, this ideal world threatens to take the place of a good God to the real world, reserving for its licensed representatives the office of priests. That is the reason why it is necessary to dissolve the special social organization of the savants by general instruction, equal for all in all things, in order that their masses, ceasing to be flocks led and shorn by privileged priests, may take into their own hands the direction of their destinies. Footnote. Science, in becoming the patrimony of everybody, will wed itself in a certain sense to the immediate and real life of each. It will gain in utility and grace what it loses in pride, ambition, and doctrinaire pedantry. This, however, will not prevent men of genius, better organized for scientific speculation than the majority of their fellows, from devoting themselves exclusively to the cultivation of the sciences and rendering great services to humanity. Only they will be ambitious for no other social influence than the natural influence exercised upon its surroundings by every superior intelligence, and for no other reward than the high delight which a noble mind always finds in the satisfaction of a noble passion. End footnote. But until the masses shall have reached this degree of instruction, will it be necessary to leave them to the government of scientific men? Certainly not. It would be better for them to dispense with science than allow themselves to be governed by savants. The first consequence of the government of these men would be to render science inaccessible to the people, and such a government would necessarily be aristocratic, because the existing scientific institutions are essentially aristocratic, an aristocracy of learning. From the practical point of view, the most implacable, and from the social point of view, the most haughty and insulting. Such would be the power established in the name of science. This regime would be capable of paralyzing the life and movement of society. The savants, always presumptuous, ever self-sufficient and ever impotent, would desire to meddle with everything, and the sources of life would dry up under the breath of their abstractions. Once more, life, not science, creates life. The spontaneous action of the people themselves alone can create liberty. Undoubtedly, it would be a very fortunate thing if science could, from this day forth, illuminate the spontaneous march of the people towards their emancipation. But better an absence of light than a false and feeble light, kindled only to mislead those who follow it. After all, the people will not lack light. Not in vain have they traversed a long historic career, and paid for their errors by centuries of misery. The practical summary of their painful experiences constitutes a sort of traditional science, which in certain respects is worth as much as theoretical science. Last of all, a portion of the youth, those of the bourgeois students who feel hatred enough for the falsehood, hypocrisy, injustice, and cowardice of the bourgeoisie to find courage to turn their backs upon it, and passion enough to unreservedly embrace the just and human cause of the proletariat, those will be, as I have already said, fraternal instructors of the people. Thanks to them, there will be no occasion for the government of the savants. If the people should beware of the government of the savants, all the more should they provide against that of the inspired idealists. The more sincere these believers and poets of heaven, the more dangerous they become. The scientific abstraction, I have said, is a rational abstraction, true in its essence, necessary to life, of which it is the theoretical representation, or, if one prefers, the conscience. It must be, absorbed and digested by life. The idealistic abstraction, God, is a corrosive poison which destroys and decomposes life, falsifies and kills it. The pride of the idealists, not being personal but divine, is invincible and inexorable. It may, it must die.